Hey, it's Mars, and this is part 1 of my Let's Make a Dungeon Crawler series, where we use plyGame as our foundation and plyblocks to visually script all of our code. Our main sources of inspiration will be the Diablo series, Path of Exile, and Grim Dawn. Honorable mentions include the Fate, Torchlight, and Titan Quest games. In this video, we'll be taking a look at how UGUI works and making a simple main menu. I'll start off by right-clicking in my hierarchy and choosing a UI canvas. Notice that it also comes with an event system, and this is just to tell the canvas when it's been clicked on, so we'll leave that there for now. I'll also press the 2D button up top so that we can look directly at our canvas here. And I'll start off by right-clicking and creating an image. And I'll put one at the top left, I'll copy and paste it, and then put another one at the bottom right. Now if we were to go to our game view and make the window smaller, and then go back to our scene view, we'll see that the images have been pushed out of the canvas, and that's because we haven't set it up to scale yet. So I'll click back to my canvas game object, and I'll change the canvas scaler component to scale with screen size, and I'll be building this interface for a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So now as I change the window size of my game window, the interface, my canvas, scales horizontally, but if I go back to my scene view, I'll see that it's not scaling vertically, and that's because in my game view, it's set to free aspect. So I'll always make sure that it's set to 16 by 9. That way, regardless of the window size of my game view, the canvas will always scale accordingly. Now if I was designing my interface and I wanted an image of some kind up at the top left of my screen, we'll see that this image up here is 738 pixels to the left of the center, and it's 465 pixels above the center. And designing an interface based off of the center of your screen would be pretty difficult. So what we want to do is anchor it to the top left of our screen. So I'll click on this rect transform crosshairs here, and I'll hold Alt, Shift, and click on the top left here. And it's now anchored to the top left of my screen. So if I wanted this image to be 20 pixels to the right, I would simply give it a transform of, I would simply give its X transform 20. And if I wanted to move it down 40 pixels, I would give it a position Y of -40. Much easier to work with. Also, our canvas has a foreground and a background. The lower you are in the hierarchy, the closer you are to the foreground. So if I was to make this image, let's say a red color, since it's lower in the hierarchy, it should appear above any other UI elements. I'll save this scene and I'll name it Main Menu. And I'll go to my screen editor, language screen, and make sure that when we press play, we end up in the main menu. I'll add that to my all game scenes. Language screen, main menu. And then if you saw the last video, we'll of course add a plyblocks, and this one will say common on start. We'll do a GUI hide all screens. So let's set up our basic main menu. I'm going to right click and choose a UI panel. And let's create a few buttons. And I'll increase the font size, which is a child of the button, this text game object. Okay. Now I'd like to show you something. I'm going to select all of the buttons and then change the normal color to be a bit darker, and then the pressed color to be even darker. Now if I were to press play, the buttons will change color by themselves whenever they're moused over. They get their highlighted color as defined in their button component. And then when I click on them, we get the pressed color. However, when I let go, this button is now stuck on its highlighted color. I'm not mousing over it, I'm not clicking on it, it seems to be stuck. And that happens whenever I click on a button. And that's because of these yellow arrows. This is actually the navigation, and right now it's set to automatic. This is done because if you were navigating through your user interface with an Xbox or a PlayStation controller, and then the button became deselected, you'd be locked out of your menu. But since we're using a keyboard and mouse, and we can always just click on buttons again, I'll grab all of my buttons, and I'll set the navigation to none. Now Unity buttons come with a built-in what's called OnClick, and this would let us trigger plyblocks events when we left-click the button. So if I was to add a plyblocks component, and I could hit this plus under OnClick, I could drag my plyblocks component right in there, and then when we left-click this button, we could do a plyblocks trigger event, and this is where we would type in the custom event name. However, the button's OnClick only supports left-clicking. So let's say we wanted to play a sound when our mouse goes on top of the button. We couldn't use the button component, but we could add component and add an event trigger. Just like what we did with the button component, we can add event. Let's do a pointer enter, hit the plus, and drag our plyblocks component right inside. We would choose plyblocks trigger event, and here we could enter the custom event name for our plyblocks event, where we would tell the button to make a clicky sound when we mouse over it. However, doing this for each button can get a bit repetitive, and it can be quite time consuming as well. So I made a very simple C# script that we'll be using, and I'll have that in the description if you'd like to download it and follow along. So I'll drag this script onto the button game object, and here it supports sending a triggering a plyblocks custom event for left clicks, right clicks, and then when your pointer goes on top of the button. So we don't need the event trigger, and we don't need to define what to do on click with the button component because the script is already taking care of that. So I'll get rid of this, and now we can choose if we want a custom plyblocks event to happen for left click, which we do, and then pointer enter. I'd like that as well. So let's go to our plyblocks, and now we need to create those custom plyblocks events. So I'll go to common custom, and we'll rename this one left click, and I'll add another common custom, and this one can be called pointer enter. And when we let's say we want the top button to be, I'll rename it from button to play game button. And I'll rename the text as well in the component. So when we click on this button, it triggers the left click event, and here we would simply go to flow, load level, and which level do we want to go to. So I'll save this. This is my main menu scene that I just created, and I'll make a new scene, and we'll save this one as, let's say, level 1. So now we've got a main menu scene and a level 1 scene. I'll make sure they're both added in plyGame project, all game scenes, and they're both there. So now when I click on my play button, in the custom left click event, we're going to load level 1. And I guess we could make button 2. I'll get rid of this button. But for our second button, let's say this was a quit game button. And I'll rename the text as well. And we also want to trigger blocks events with mouse. And let's make that left click custom event. So add a plyBlocks component. Left click. And I'll also give it a pointer enter custom event so we can play a sound on mouse over. And in the left click event for the quit game button, let's do a flow exit game. Now we want a clicky sound for when the mouse goes on top of these buttons. So I'm going to grab both of my button game objects and I'll add the component audio source. And I'll uncheck play on awake so that the sound doesn't play as soon as we hit the play button. I'll drop a sound into the audio sources. And now, on my custom pointer enter event, all we're going to do is audio play. And I'll do the same thing for my quit game custom pointer enter event. We'll do audio play. And that should be it. So I will hit play and see what happens. Sounds work, they light up correctly. I'll hit play game and it should load level 1. Perfect. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and if you learned something, hit that like button. Join me next time where we'll be making our first player.